So how do you then start thinking about these CRAs and using these cognitive strategies? Now here are three, for instance, that you'll be receiving: Exploring a College Textbook, Reader's Analysis, and Words, Words, Words. In these three CRAs, I think maybe all three of them already have questions written for you. That's great. I'd encourage you to use those questions, whether students fill it out on a piece of paper or you ask them during class. I would encourage you to at least engage all students. One downfall of simply asking a question in class is some kids are still spacing out and some kids are paying attention. By using paper or asking students to fill something out, you're making sure that all students are being held accountable for thinking about the information. But all of these CRAs already have questions for you. And again, I'd encourage you to use feedback, tell the students what they got correct or incorrect, or have a discussion in class about what an appropriate answer might be. Some of these other ones, for instance, I understand what you're saying, but is a CRA about debate, getting students to debate and take half the class takes one side of an issue and the other class, the other half takes another side of the issue. For space practice, for instance, debating is a great skill. I would encourage you to not just use that CRA once, but to think about incorporating debate into everything you're learning or everything the students are learning. So that maybe once a week on Fridays, you split students up between half that felt that the North should have won in the Civil War and half that felt that the South should have won, and do a debate. And then a week later, try that again with something else that students are learning in your classroom. So it's the technique in the CRAs. Again, you don't have to stick to the CRAs word for word. It's the technique in the CRAs or the basic outline I find helpful, and then thinking about, okay, well, I'm going to use this debate idea, but I'm going to use it once a week for the next few weeks. A few others, for instance, what's the message is a CRA about political cartoons, asking students to look at a political cartoon, try to understand what the artist was persuading the audience of, what they were trying to get across. So with Interleaving, for instance, you might want students to look at sort of a left-leaning Democrat political cartoonist, and then immediately switch to a right-leaning Republican-leaning cartoonist, and go back and forth to encourage students to compare and contrast between two very different kinds of cartoonists, or two very different kinds of situations. For instance, a political cartoon about the Vietnam War, and then a political cartoon about the Iraq War. Encourage students to go back and forth and to discriminate and compare information. With math, for instance, I believe these two CRAs, from what I remember last night, already have questions written for you. With spaced practice, all in a day's work, students in math are encouraged to think about two job scenarios and come up with which one they should pick, because which one gets them more money, but which one has better experience. And so it's a great complex lesson. Space practice, for instance, maybe encourage the students over time. Okay, I've just learned about biology. So if I want to be a biologist at X industry place or a biologist at a university, which job scenario should I pick? Then the students move on to physics. Then you could come up with two other job scenarios for physics and have them go through that practice as well. So again, you're using the technique in the CRA, but you're spacing it out over time, as opposed to just saying, let's do this one CRA, the kids have the skills or they have the content knowledge, and move on. Try to use some of the underlying information or skills in the CRA and space it out or revisit them during your class. Interleaved practice, a great example is checking the numbers, a CRA about having students develop how to check for errors in UPC codes or learning about functions. That one seems almost a no-brainer. Just have them look at different kinds of UPC errors instead of learning all of one kind of UPC error and then moving on to another one, or all of one kind of function and moving on to another one. Try to encourage them to mix it up. Or again, revisit one function on one day and one function on another day. So here are some examples from science. Again, some CRAs already have questions built in. It should be easy to come up with your own questions or ask students to generate their own questions. Space practice. In science, students in Slippery Slope learn about a block going down a plane, and they learn about acceleration and velocity, I think. So that's a good skill to understand about using a lab and trying to extract information and then understand a basic principle of physics. Try to encourage or think about how you can adopt that CRA in multiple ways over the course of your class. Interleaved practice, students learn about mitosis, for instance, and divide to multiply. So maybe with all the different stages in mitosis, help students learn about stage number 1 on a Monday, stage number 2 on a Tuesday, stage number 3 on a Thursday, and then mix it up. Then have students recall or remember, what was stage number 2 of mitosis? Okay, well, how do we get there and how does stage 1 relate? Make sure you're not just going from one to the other and moving on. And finally, with social science, again, many CRAs have questions. You can look at Japanese American internment and try to take some of the skills from that CRA and space it out over time. With protests from Berkeley to Kent State, students are looking at protests that happen, for instance, about the free speech movement or the anti-war movement. Encourage them to look at different movements as opposed to just you kids learn about anti-war and you all learn about free speech. Encourage them to learn about different types of protests and mix them around a bit so that students really do learn the difference between different protests, what might have led to them, what might be differences, what might be similarities. Really do encourage that interleaved practice again. Read through a CRA and see, is the CRA one that's appropriate for spaced practice? Or can I get both retrieval practice and feedback into this CRA? Or how do I interleave concepts in this one for my own classroom?